site was actually like if somebody registered a different domain name and asked them, is this the correct name? And they said yes. And that basically created a phishing problem for them. But then later on, one of their suppliers that they used had an Adobe Flash thing in there, which they didn't realize the domain of that company was lapsed. Somebody else bought the domain and started serving malware through their site using Flash, which is more salt than vinegar. So they didn't really understand their landscape. They didn't understand what their exposure was. Anyway, so it was a mess. Really was a mess. But then we get to a bigger mess, in my opinion. And this is not Amazon's fault, to be frank right now. It's not Amazon's fault. This is, in my opinion, this is like 2000, 2001 Apache web servers not being secured, right? This is schoolboy errors. So this guy, Chris Vickery from ArtGuard, made a real name for himself just by trawling through DNS names and hopping around and seeing what he can access. And you know, it's not really rocket science. You go to S3 bucket and you get actually an XML document back, and you can use that XML document to go look at other juicy stuff, and then just troll, and hop around. So it's not rocket science. But this guy actually just said, well, ask a simple question: what happens if I go here? Am I supposed to see this data? So it's a mere config setting. I mean, Amazon went as far as put big orange red letters on your website saying public. Yeah. There's public S3 buckets here. Are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure anyways, it just is public. And people still do that. Because honestly, I think there's a lot of people have got a lot of S3 buckets, which probably legitimately have to be open because they serve content like web, a lot of JavaScript, whatever. So they use it as a content share as well as a data share.
But to be honest, if you look at a lot of the cases where this happens and people get burnt, is the US contractors for the security, for like missile defense and stuff like that. So API gateway is built to give access to things like that with authentication, with extra things. So you could easily pull that off with basic auth and still at least block 80% of people looking around. It's
correct. It's not rocket science. And I mean, these are just some of the examples. So private contractor, Booz Allen, private SSH keys exposed. I mean, you look at Equifax is what, 148 million records, but here's the Republican National Conference with like that many voter data. Verizon, the telephony software, like records. There was even talk about some of voice recordings where they were doing machine learning on voice recording data was lying there. Wall Street Journal records there. Then the more Amazon stuff, Chicago Board Election Commissions. This one is actually quite interesting. This Argus one is a private security firm for American veterans. So they had all these guys with CVs on there, right, with top military clearances and everything that they've done, you know, past field experience and so forth. And they actually started getting into a problem because they were actually like, all these terrorists, let's call them terrorists, but any activists, whatever, that actually started targeting these guys and their families because there was addresses in there, everything. It was publicly possible, and these guys could actually been, you know, their families could have been compromised as well, because these guys were doing military service in terrorist areas. So that was quite a scary one for the victims. Viacom also, they had like their Puppet server was left exposed with all the build information on how to spin up more Viacom. You could actually have your own Nickelodeon server if you wanted to.
Or you could bankrupt them.
You could actually just stream it for free. Accenture was also quite interesting. That their cloud platform was exposed. Pentagon NSA stuff wasn't 100% clear, but there's probably that missile defense platform stuff they had on there.
Well, the NSA was working on a quantum computer or supercomputer, and the plans were on an S3 bucket.
Yeah, was it? Yeah.
Because they were working with the university, and the university students needed to upload.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. And then National Credit Federation, a couple of gigs of data there, and 2 data analytics firms, which you'd think is not a problem. So I don't know if Cambridge Analytics is any worse than them, but you know, it seems like free sharing of personal information is a thing with these companies. But to be honest, most likely human error. You know, I don't think it's Amazon being problematic here. But then, what is worse than...
I want to say here, this is a case of the S3 bucket being like a gun. You now ban guns because people shoot others instead of using the tool for what it's supposed to be now to be used.
Or you make every S3 bucket private unless you set it otherwise, and then people stop using Amazon. You know, it's that kind of logic that you're trying to fight.
Yeah. So what could be worse than a readable private S3 bucket?
What are you going to store?
How about a writable S3 bucket? So I mean, it's definitely, you know, a notch up, right? Giving somebody the access to change integrity of files, right? Add stuff to it, for instance. But in this line of work, it's easy to see the depravity of certain type of humans. You know, the incident that actually came up was the LA Times has got a homicide map, which shows all the murders in Los Angeles in the area, and that had an S3 bucket that was compromised, and somebody uploaded the CoinHive cryptocurrency JavaScript on there. So every time people went there for statistics, the machine was using lots of resources for some reason. Mining Monero, okay. So these things are rampant out there, it happens. And data exposure is a problem, but also people changing your data is a bigger thing. But then I think there's another more insidious issue. So it's supply chain. I think most people in the IT industry have heard of Ccleaner. It's a tool that you use to clean your registry, etc., and modify stuff. And see, Microsoft's answer to that is not to allow vendors to clean your registry, but I don't know. But that's just a side note. But
you can still write as much as you want when you install it to the registry, and then
yes.
3 years later it's unusable because the disk is full.
Because of the registry fault. So, interesting thing about this is, and this comes back to some of those topics, and how this, I was quite fortunate in this because they published this month how Avast bought the company 4 months before, well, they were compromised 4 months and Avast bought them, which is an antivirus company, by the way. And they published this month how that happened. So basically, it's through credential reuse on the TeamViewer, which had direct access to the developer's box. Alright, so you know, that credentials were probably found in a dump or something, and they just so happened to iterate through these things, and voila, they got in there. But still, TeamViewer needs certain other aspects to get on there, so how did they get on there? I don't know, but according to them, credential reuse through TeamViewer. So they attempted to install malware, but luckily that developer, for some reason, didn't have admin rights. And then the next day, they decided, well, let's try something different, and they looked for RDP boxes from that box. And this all happened like at night, when like 4 o'clock at night, 3 o'clock at night, which actually was quite a good giveaway for when they went through the logs, because this developer doesn't necessarily work at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. But anyway, so they found a RDP, possibly a stored credential, so RDP to another box, installed a keystroke capture thing, and then they got credentials from there. From there, they moved on to the build server. And then it took them 5 months in all in total to actually push that shadow payload into the Ccleaner code base. But the time span that took so long was probably because they had access to the code base and they could figure out what they wanted to install, and then, you know, they had enough time. So in that time, it means that that TeamViewer account was still active. All this other, they probably also had like a reverse shell or something. But anyway, undetected for 5 months, easily. Only a bit later, Talos, Cisco Threat Intel company, detected something funny going on. That's after 2.27 million downloads when that happened. So those guys had some fun there. But this is the risk of supply chain. Supply chain indicates that you have software that you trust, that you use in your business, that gets compromised. You don't even know it gets compromised. You willingly bring it in through the front door. Like us coming through the front door into the store. It could be some nasty people sitting in this room, we didn't even know it. You know, we could be all vampires and you just allowed us in your house.
Did you turn the network off, Apache? Sorry? Did you turn the network off?
Yeah, free net.
It's also signed with a legitimate key, so you wouldn't even know.
Goes through their build process.
And it's open source, even better.
So,
and it went through the build process. So who signed that off? Who allowed? Who checked that commit? If there was a commit log or whatever, who did that?
If you go back to that a while back, I can't remember which network provider it was, but they were shipping in their OS and the switch a debug piece of code that they couldn't even find the logs for in the Git.
Was it the Juniper?
Yeah, that one.
That was the OPM hack.
And a lot of this goes back to your list of 20 things. If you start at number 20, you often find that you have to go back to 1 and retrace everything and actually have to start from scratch again, just because you didn't pay the initial tax.
Yeah. And that's the sad thing. I mean, these things are, and it speaks to the findings later. These are complex problems to solve. It's not straightforward, but it's that one thing.
Complex if you've screwed up.
It's that one thing. I mean, if that wasn't there, you could argue yes. At least they did something right there, no privileges. But you know, then all these other things just knocked on. So my other question is, how did Avast, how did they do due diligence on this company? That's my other question. How did that part? Was the due diligence before the 4 months? I don't know.
You know where the term snake oil comes from?
Enlighten us.
But anyway, that's an interesting story to go and read up on. But the snake oil that gets a due diligence, the story goes that the American company were buying some Arab oil refinery of some sort. And part of the due diligence was to check the oil, that is how many oil they have, or fuel they have, petroleum they have there. So how do you check for petroleum? The way you do it is you take the stick, you throw it down, you pull it back up, and you mark the top mark on the little stick basically. And that is how much you basically do the calculation. This is the circumference, this is the height, and do the calculations. However, what these Arab guys did apparently was they had the bottom part was full of water. Only the top part were the petroleum.
You just floated on top.
So everything looks fine when you do the dipstick thing, but so yes, such type of due diligence can happen.
Yeah, so it depends on how thorough you are, it seems. This is another example of supply chain, but this is a more insidious one, I think, because if you look at the chain of events, and Kaspersky is not only one to blame, but definitely there's an interesting story behind this. So apparently, according to the claims, the Kaspersky helps the Russia to spy on the NSA through document theft. Now, let's see, if that, as the story unravels, we start seeing interesting things. So, how did the NSA know about this? Apparently, the Israelis hacked Kaspersky. They informed NSA that, wait a minute, the Russians are spying on you because they got your documents and your tools. But then my other question is, why was the Israelis hacking Kaspersky? Anyway, so at least two spy agencies was in the AV company that we all use, right? So we already compromised if you use Kaspersky, it seems. But it also turns out that, you know, the documents came from an NSA employee that took the documents home. Well, that Kaspersky wasn't running in NSA, it was running on a personal document, on a personal PC or at home. But also what was interesting was, according to Kaspersky, that NSA operative or employee was running a cracked or a pirated version of Office 2013 that had a backdoor, even called smoke loaders, that they detected. And part of that whole detection process is, you know, they start picking these things up, and so Kaspersky's got a whole process where they get heuristics or hashes, and then they take what they find and they upload it and analyze it. And to their credit, their tools are good enough to detect funky stuff, right? Not just documents, but also the tool. So the way the documents were exfiltrated because of that, but also they detected funky weird stuff. But this guy was apparently a Vietnamese national that worked for the NSA. So he was prosecuted now. But what was interesting in the stats is that he was at least the third guy in the last 2 years. And if you count Snowden in 2013, was the fourth one. So NSA's got a problem. It's not necessarily
the USB problem.
Yeah, but apparently there's another guy, Harold Martin. He had like documents, stacks and stacks of documents at his house as well. So it was not just digital copy as hard copy as well.
But surely, if anyone practices OPSEC, it is someone from the NSA.
Supposedly, yes. But maybe the NSA's employees are so good at OPSEC, NSA doesn't even realize they're stealing from them.
I mean, this is like nearly Hillary and the email server.
Yeah, it's the same thing. You know, it's similar. So my question is like, how's Kaspersky to blame for all of this? You know, for making good tools or for actually enabling the Russian government? I don't know. But and there's another story about, I think was this now with this whole trolling thing with the Russian trolling form. The Russian trolling guys were actually the Dutch cyber offensive, if I want to use that word, actually hacked the Russian trolling, one of the Russian trolling farms, and they actually saw through their cameras what these guys were doing, and they alerted the Americans about this, and they didn't do anything about it because like didn't understand, right? Look, these guys sitting on Facebook doing shit posting, excuse the word, but these things happen. So if Kaspersky gets hacked and compromised, I mean, who else is not getting compromised that we know of? But anyway, so let's get to our anniversary edition. To any of you guys play games, you'll recognize that dude, Mass Effect 2, the Shadow Broker. So it's a year ago, 14th April last year, a bunch of documents and tools and stuff gets dumped. And we all of a sudden have a new vocabulary and we eternal everything. But to Microsoft's credit, they rushed out MS 17.10. Like I said, even patched XP for that. But that's thankful not to their good practices, and so, because the NSA realized this and they had to burn all these 0 days. So they literally burned all of that. They said, well, somebody's got it, we don't have it anymore, we know it got exclusive use of this, so let's just burn it. So they, because the Shadow Broker guys were busy auctioning the stuff off and whatever. Anyway, long story short, they had to burn it. But what that did is just like open sourced everything for everybody, right? So now everybody's got this stuff. But it shouldn't be a problem because everybody patched, right? Yeah. Everybody patched. And nobody's got port 445 open to the internet egress and ingress, right? Nobody.
Well, nobody has a Windows server on the internet.
And lo and behold, 12 May, we started seeing screensavers like this. And what was interesting about this is I never knew you could get famous for registering a domain name. So Marcus Hutchins, aka Malware Tech, he just registered a domain name, stopped the whole spiel, singled WannaCry, and he became a hero.
And the rest.
But you think,
but
you think that that would be the end of it, right? I don't know. Ask Boeing. Apparently, they still got malware, and the reason why they got still WannaCry and why that WannaCry didn't stop because of the sinkhole is somehow it got in, and because of the domain servers not being accessible to the internet because that's secure, that malware WannaCry couldn't hit a domain resolution for the sinkhole. So it's like, oh, my kill switch is not activated, so let's just continue on, right? So what lesson does that then? So if you've got an internal DNS server, just register all the kill switches on your DNS server, right? Or at least take known domain names and put it to your own sinkhole, right? Which way you can detect and monitor something is doing a lookup for this, or who the hell is doing a lookup for a WannaCry sinkhole, right? So these are interesting things that we need to learn about malware in general. It's like there's certain things that happen, domain-generated algorithms. Interesting thing. Some of those of us might still remember Configure, right? It's an old thing. It's still alive. It's still happening. It's still generating domain names as we speak. It's something that doesn't die because it's got one property that's awesome about it. It does password brute forcing. Because people use still weak passwords, it's still alive. It can still spread because it's vulnerable. All right. So
but going back, sorry, to where you had the supply chain slides. So one big area that
which one? This one?
Yeah, but just one big area though that we really don't talk of, but it's an area that is really growing, is around our dependencies with like when you're doing software development on open source tools. So with that as well, you're introducing libraries to environment that you basically you're evaluating them based on how many people have actually pulled down this code or are reusing this. And now you're getting people actually putting in vulnerable, like I think I saw the one where this guy was basically collecting credit cards, but he basically got a lot of people getting a hype on his library. So ended up getting a lot of people tagging onto that library, but one of the dependencies in the library was actually the one that had the vulnerability. But now because the chain is so long, you actually might not figure out, okay, it's actually within your code that you put in one library, and that library has dependencies that are
correct.
That are quite long.
And there's a company called Black Duck. They do commercial software offering. They actually have a way of doing these open source tool evaluations, and they give like ratings on tools. So if you subscribe to them, they can tell you your vulnerabilities for this, etc., etc. But you don't have to. I mean, that's a good offering. But OWASP has got a dependency check for Java, which you can run, and actually it's quite good. It actually correlates CVEs to libraries in your Maven and Maven repository. What's it called? Nexus, something like that, and it can pull it off. So that's actually quite a good one. But then you get more insidious supply chain attacks on software development ones, targeting newbie programmers, right? People learning to program. The Polish CERT published an article actually about Python libraries called using a technique typo squatting. So mistyping something, right? So using a library where you just substitute certain libraries, and if you're a newbie programmer, you sometimes don't know what you're doing, and you can't substitute. Now you're pulling down this malware into your Python repository. It still works like advertised, but there's some extra hooks built in. So supply chain is a big problem.
Even npm will install sometimes without the hashing matching.
Yeah.
And I mean, Harun Mir and Marcus Laviero, they could talk about that at Black Hat once. So they looked at libraries, they looked at the package management, so the servers themselves, where they store the vulnerable, usually it's over HTTP, so you can still intercept them. And then the other problem is, if you look at Python, Ruby, JavaScript, all of these are vulnerable to like serialization attacks, which was one of the WASP top 10. So Python's pickle is still, I think, to this day vulnerable.
Java RMI. I mean, Oracle got one. WebLogic now got a deserialization attack.
And you paid for the upgrade.
But there's actually there's guys that actually published a blacklisting, not blacklist, like a mitigation for it. And also remember, just leave port 7001 not exposed to the internet. That'll help as well. But yeah, supply chain, and I mean, I didn't even touch on the hardware aspect, but we're going to get to the hardware and some of the honorable mentions. I mean, China is now, ZTE, Huawei, those guys are really getting nailed by America because of fear, not America, Australia as well, fear of surveillance hardware being dropped on their carrier networks. America is so paranoid they want to, like, what do you call it, nationalize the 5G network. So,
why do you think the Yanks are so paranoid, if I may ask?
I don't know, maybe it's something they said, or maybe it's the president, I don't know.
Or maybe something they've done themselves.
It's you know, it's good.
You need to be a thief.
It's good you say that, because, you know, people start emulating other people, you know, it's definitely painting targets in your back. You like getting nailed, yeah.
So one of my favorite things to come out from shadow brokers and the CIA hacks is that, I can't remember which one, had scripts to detect the other side. So first thing they detect is the NSA on here already? Is the CIA on here already? And then it's like Israelis, GCHQ, the rest of the Five Eyes, and then it's like Russians, Iranians. So by that logic, surely everything's a little compromised at this point.
No, I mean, South Africa, I believe South Africa is already fully compromised down to the core. We have no hope in hell. The only thing is we have to choose a side.
Yeah, the African Union, I mean, the African Union literally said China please sponsor this building, so they sponsored all the networking hardware, and then they realized that at 4 a.m. there was a constant like stream of data every day going out.
It's this, somebody, a colleague of mine, some of you might know him, Shaul van der Walt. He's got an interesting talk about balkanization. So it means that, as in the World War II era, where people had to choose sides, and you had to, am I going to be Russian, am I going to be Allied, whatever. We've already got to that point where you have to choose: are you going to buy American vendors, are you going to buy Chinese vendors, are you going to buy Russian vendors, or are you going to buy hodgepodge? I think that line has already been drawn and passed. We're already there. You already have to have, you've already chosen your side. Otherwise, you find just that people fighting in your own network and don't understand why your latency is so high. Intel ARM, RISC-V, but we are.
Well, there's hoping, right?
Yeah, there's hoping. So, following WannaCry, we had an interesting event, another ransomware, but well, maybe not ransomware. It turns out that the Russians don't like the Ukraine that much. Ukraine is definitely their petri dish when it comes to weaponization of stuff. They tend to use that as a playpen. But what was interesting about this is, although it was pretty much localized to the Ukraine area, it was spreading. But with WannaCry, there was a kill switch, and it only lasted a couple of days. There was no such kill switch in this thing, and this thing just wreaked havoc. It jumped all over the place, and no matter how much Bitcoin you pumped into the account, your files would not be decrypted. Because it turns out that these guys weren't really interested in decrypting your files. Once again, also, I didn't include it in the supply chain, but MidDoc accounting firm software, which is probably runs 80% of Ukraine's accounting software, which is required by government to be able to claim VAT and stuff, was compromised, the update server. And those accountants were doing well with the updates. I mean, you can give them quite a good kudos, because the updates were pushing through. And companies that did business in Ukraine were also affected. I mean, Maersk, Sealand, FedEx, TNT, they were hit hard. I mean, DNL Piper, which is a law firm in America, got hit. I mean, I saw a picture of the sign with people entering the building the next morning. There was a sign that said, if you have a laptop, you haven't connected to the network, do not turn it on. Because that was their mitigation for this thing at the moment. But what's scary was the Chernobyl automatic radiation monitoring system was also compromised. There are other interesting things. There was an airport, I think, compromised. The German rail autobahn, I think, was compromised. There was a lot of people that got hit by this. But the interesting thing is, I'm sure this is the first time a ransomware statement ended up on financial statements of businesses. Because Maersk Sealand, I think, reported something like $300 million they spent in that. It closed ports in a couple of countries, but they had to close it down. They couldn't access their computers for shipping lane and logistics. This was vicious. Then his little cousin Bad Rubber joined. It was a little blip. But what was interesting about it was it had some effects of better in it, but it was using Eternal Romance as opposed to Eternal Blue and all other ones. But also it was basically a drive-by attack with Flash. If you visited certain sites that was compromised, you would get this. Only if you executed that, and only if you allowed Adobe Flash. Right? Flash can't die fast enough, but it's still a thing apparently.
HTML5 has only been around for how long?
Yeah, I think Flash's end of life is 2020 or something like that. But
Still 2 years left.
but sorry. SARS, yeah, e-filing. So I think that's a bigger vulnerability there. Not paying your SARS.
Paying them is also expensive. Either way.
I see that as ransomware.
Yeah.
Also, mostly concentrated in Russia, Eastern Europe. But again, so coming back to Atlanta that Christo said, apparently they claim it was Samsung, which after they spent 2.6 million in consultants, incident triage, etc., they really couldn't solve, because it seems like they didn't have backups. they suspect it was through this Capricorn billing system was running Java and the possible Java deserialization issue in there. But it's not the first time they were hit apparently with ransomware. Seems like they had issues with MS 17010 a while back, which is